Good afternoon, Chamber members. For those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Angie Talent. I'm the broker owner of Summers Sotheby's International Realty and the 2021 chair-elect for the Greater Fairbanks Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to take a moment, as we do each week, to thank our executive partners whose logos you see on the screen before you. These businesses are the backbone of business in our community and a pillar of strength for the Fairbanks Chamber. A full list of our executive partners can be found on our website. Now to today's program. Welcome to the Fairbanks Chamber's Political Forum for candidates running for U.S. House and Senate. Today's forum will last 90 minutes. If you can't stay online until 1:30 today, or you missed any of our previous forums, recordings of all the 2020 Fairbanks Chamber forums can be found on fairbankschamber.org. The Greater Fairbanks Chamber of Commerce is a nonpartisan organization which advocates for the conditions that allow businesses of all sizes to prosper in our region. We are focused on the betterment of our members by working with all levels of local, state, and federal government officials. Our goal for our political forum is to help you and the audience understand your choices during this fall's election cycle. The candidates here today will appear on the ballot for the November 3rd general election. Please remember that you have a choice this fall, like always, whether to vote in person or by mail. Early in-person voting started last week at the State of Alaska building on 7th Avenue and at the UAF Wood Center. If you request an absentee ballot, make sure you follow the instructions and get it postmarked by Election Day. Check out elections at alaska.gov for early voting hours, Election Day polling locations, or to check the status of your absentee ballot. Now I'd like to introduce you to our moderator. She has been here to welcome you at the beginning of all of our forums each week, but today she has volunteered to moderate the whole discussion. Sabrina Binkley is the 2020 chair of the Fairbanks Chamber's Board of Directors. Sabrina is the head of school and founder of Spruce Tree Montessori, Fairbanks' only secular private school and the only Montessori school in Alaska accredited at the highest level by the American Montessori Society. In 2016, the school moved to its current home in the beautifully repurposed historic train depot in downtown Fairbanks. Spruce Tree currently has a COVID-responsible enrollment of 80 students and employs 12 full-time staff. In addition to serving as this year's Chamber Board Chair, she served as the Chamber's Education and Workforce Development Committee Chair for 4 years and has served on the Executive Committee for the past 3. She has been a Rotarian for 14 years, a charter member of the Golden Heart Rotary Club. She is a member of the Alaska Montessori Association Board of Directors, on which she serves as the board secretary-treasurer. At home, she enjoys cooking, entertaining friends and family, yoga, and family movie nights. Sabrina is married to Ryan Binkley, and together they have 2 boys, Simon and Clive. Welcome, Sabrina, and thank you for moderating today.
Thank you so much, Angie. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to kick off the forum with a word of thanks to the candidates who have joined us today. Thank you so sincerely for your willingness to serve in public office and for the work you do on behalf of not only the residents here in Fairbanks and the businesses here, but also throughout the nation. I think with all the ads these days, most can put your face with your name, but as I introduce you, please wave so the audience knows who you are. The candidates running for U.S. House of Representatives are Ms. Elise S. Galvin and Congressman Don Young. Please wave. The candidates running for U.S. Senate are Dr. Al Gross and Senator Dan Sullivan. Thank you for participating, everyone, and welcome to the forum, live from our lower elementary classroom here at Spruce Tree Montessori. Our students participate each year in kids voting, and this year have been learning more and more about the current landscape. So in my audience today, in person, on my end, is our upper elementary cohort. Welcome, guys. I also want to extend the Chamber's sincere thanks to our Political Forum series sponsors, Alaska Oil and Gas Association, Doi Unlimited, Hale & Associates, Hedgecock Group Real Estate, and Mac Federal Credit Union. These organizations support informed voting and encourage you to engage with the important issues facing our state. Before we start, we have a few words from one of those sponsors, Hedgecock Group Real Estate.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Thompson with Hedgecock Group Real Estate. In a time when we're in the middle of a global pandemic, national upheaval, and all of our lives are disrupted, you have the opportunity to still be empowered. You can be empowered by being informed. Tune into the Chamber's political forums to see what's happening on the issues that affect us personally right here in Fairbanks, Alaska. Empower yourself, be informed, vote November 3rd, and be the change.
Now let's do a quick review of our event format. The candidates will be asked a series of questions that are either short answer or yes, no. Each candidate will have the opportunity to ask one question to his or her opponent and may rebut an opponent's answer once during the forum. We have also reserved time at the end for audience questions. If any of our online audience have questions throughout the presentation, please type them into the chat box on YouTube. Chamber staff will review the questions and select a few to ask the candidates. Now, to the candidates, I have a few last-minute instructions before we begin. As I ask each question, I will give you a time limit. I will also indicate the order in which you will answer. We will rotate the order for each question to give everyone a turn to speak first. Candidates for the House will always answer back-to-back, as will candidates for the Senate, to help viewers understand their choices for each seat. After each person has finished speaking, I will indicate the next candidate, just in case you forget. Our official timekeeper, Chamber President and CEO Marissa Shera, will start the timer on the screen when you begin speaking. Please stop when your time is up so we can cover all of our questions. The timer will briefly flash red if you are in the middle of a sentence when the time expires. We do, however, if necessary, Chamber staff reserves the responsibility to mute your line to keep things moving. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and get started. So each candidate will have 30 seconds to answer this introductory question. We will start with the House candidates in alphabetical order by last name. Ms. Galvin, then Congressman Young. Following them, we will continue with the Senate candidates, Dr. Gross and Senator Sullivan. The question is, if you could guarantee one piece of legislation to pass in 2021, what would it be and why? Ms. Galvin, please start us off with your 30-second response.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, Sabrina. The number one piece of legislation I will support in the post-pandemic era is a comprehensive infrastructure bill that is inclusive of roads, bridges, ports, and high-speed broadband internet. This will get Americans and Alaskans back to work. And if we plan it right, we will also protect our coastline, connect our resources to market, and add tourist access. And then there will be important return on investment for Alaska and the country. As the nation climbs out of this post-pandemic induced recession, there will be a tremendous interest in funding infrastructure projects across the country.
Thank you, Ms. Galvin. Congressman Young, 30 seconds.
One bill would be the Magnuson-Stevens Act. That was my bill when it was first passed by the United States Congress. It's worked well, but it hasn't been renewed for now, about 6 or 7 years. I've introduced a bill that's bipartisan. We do think we'll get it done next year. I'm going to work on that very hardly so we can continue a sustainable yield of our fish. Has worked beautifully ever since we passed that law, and I'm proud of being the author of that piece of legislation. The Magnuson-Stevens Act should have been called the Young Studs Act, as we wrote it in the House.
Thank you, Congressman Young. Dr. Gross.
We need to restore trust in government because that's what it's going to take to get control of and to beat COVID-19 pandemic and to get our economy back again. And we need to make healthcare affordable so people can go back to work. We need another COVID relief package to help small businesses in conjunction with a public health care option. And people should be able to buy into a public health care system at cost. The cost of entry for getting a good paying job in Alaska is just too high because the cost of getting good health insurance is too expensive. And after years as a doctor and studying the issue, I believe this is the best choice to introduce competition into the marketplace and will give people more choices. There's a lot we have to get done to build a better future for Alaska.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gross. And Senator Sullivan, 30 seconds.
So there's going to be a focus on COVID and our military, but I would focus on my bill with Congressman Young and Senator Murkowski, the University of Alaska Fiscal Foundation Act. That would resolve once and for all the university's unfulfilled land grant promise that would guarantee a really strong fiscal future for the university system. You know, that's going to be 500,000 acres in our bill. Unfortunately, National Democrats will probably oppose it because they don't like land to Alaskans, but we think this is a critical bill for the fiscal future of our universities.
Great, thank you, Senator Sullivan. Now we have a series of questions based on the Fairbanks Chamber's advocacy agenda and issues suggested by our Fairbanks Chamber members. You'll have 45 seconds to answer the first question. We will start with House candidates again, Congressman Young, then Ms. Galvin, then Senate candidates, Senator Sullivan and Dr. Gross. In 2020, the politically polarized atmosphere seems to emphasize winning the argument rather than legislating effectively. At the Fairbanks Chamber, we're really interested in seeing the work of government get done, even if nobody gets everything they want. The question is, what actions will you take to encourage compromise and bipartisanship in our government? And where do you see opportunities for compromise in the next Congress? We'll start with Congressman Young.
Well, thank you. I thought my term came up sooner than that, but thank you very much. Of course, I've been ranked as one of the most nonpartisan congressmen over the years I've served this great state. And you look at the record, the laws I've passed with co-sponsors and sponsoring other bills has been really good. We have a slight problem because now it's been divided media-wise. People are not trying to sit down and solve problems. They'd rather argue about something. And when you do that, when you don't govern, very frankly, the president will run the House, run the Senate, and that's not correct. So I'm arguing that we should work together. I've talked to a lot of my Democrat friends. They happen to agree with me. There's one group that my opponent keeps saying she's going to join. They haven't passed one bill. I'll say they're not really effective. So we're going to try to rechange that so we have a group of people that want to solve problems, not just argue about them.
Thank you, Congressman Young. Ms. Galvin? Oh, you're on mute, Ms. Galvin.
Thank you for that question, Sabrina. I think more than anything, Alaskans and Americans are sick of the hyperpartisanship that's just so divisive and really driving us to not trust government anymore. I registered as an independent 15 years ago. Like many Alaskans, I reached a breaking point with the hyperpartisanship, disabling our elected officials. I saw them making decisions to please party bosses and ignoring the needs of the people that they were elected to serve. With me in Congress, Alaskans get the best of both worlds. A member of the Majority Caucus, who is an independent advocate for Alaska, our jobs, our oil and gas industry, our Second Amendment rights, and our way of life. I will stand up to the National Democrats who would otherwise curtail Alaska's interests, but I will do it from inside the room where the decisions are being made, not out in the cold like unfortunately Don Young would be in the minority.
Thank you, Ms. Galvin. Senator Sullivan, 45 seconds.
Well, Sabrina, I'm proud of the fact that, like Congressman Young, I've been ranked one of the most effective legislators in the U.S. Senate and one of the most bipartisan. I'll continue to fight the anti-Alaska agenda, which my opponent will empower. That's the anti-resource development, anti-Second Amendment, anti-military that the National Democrats, Chuck Schumer and others have. That's clearly their agenda. But I'll also continue to work in a bipartisan fashion. You know, my Save Our Seas Act is one of the most comprehensive ocean cleanup legislations ever. All my work on domestic violence, the Power Act, my Human Trafficking Act, all of these things became law. And another one, my Visit America Act, another bipartisan piece of legislation critical to our economy, is another area that I would work in a bipartisan way, continue that work as I've been doing.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Dr. Gross.
Well, thank you. First, that's why I'm running as an independent. My only loyalty is to the Alaskan people and not a political party. And partisanship seems to be the only language that my opponent seems to understand. I grew up watching bipartisanship in action. My father worked alongside Governor Jay Hammond in bipartisan fashion to create many of the state's greatest programs, including the PFD and many others. I believe an infrastructure bill, specifically broadband expansion and the Alberta to Alaska rail line, will create thousands of new jobs and will help get people back to work. And this is an area where we can find bipartisan agreement. And by the way, the Save Our Seas Act did nothing more than fund NOAA to study the garbage problem. It didn't do a darn thing to clean it up.
Thank you, Dr. Gross. Okay, so a friendly reminder to our online audience, if you have a question you would like to have asked of the candidates, please submit it in the chat box. Now we'll take our first candidate to candidate question. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to ask their opponent a question, and the opponent will have 60 seconds to answer. If desired, the asking candidate may take 15 seconds to address the answer, and then the opponent may have an additional 30 seconds to clarify. We drew the order randomly before the broadcast today. We will start with Senator Sullivan. Candidate to candidate questions will be interspersed throughout the rest of our program today. They will go in the order of Senator Sullivan, Congressman Young, then Dr. Al Gross, and finally Ms. Elise Galvin. Okay, Senator Sullivan, you have 30 seconds to ask your question.
Alan, one of Chuck Schumer's and the far left's top goals is to pack the Senate by adding 2 new states to the country, Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. Do you support this Schumer goal, which is devised unequivocally to give national Democrats 4 more seats in the U.S. Senate, which would cement their anti-Alaska agenda that I've been talking about in the Senate, probably permanently?
Well, thanks for the question, Dan. I would not support expanding that. I think that's a bad idea. I support 50 states in our country. And while I agree that there are problems with the rules in the Senate and that I believe our current Supreme Court justices are poised to strike down the Affordable Care Act and to strike down Roe versus Wade, I'm committed to working within the system to make our system work better, not changing it.
Okay, Senator Sullivan, do you have a 15-second response?
Yeah, this is a really important response. There you go again, Al. On one of your many Zooms where you tell certain people one thing that you won't tell others, you said, quote, I would support making Washington, D.C. a state and support making Puerto Rico a state. We're going to put that out on our Facebook right now so everybody can see how you are being dishonest to the Alaskan people, telling them one thing and your fundraisers another thing. Very disappointing that you're lying to Alaskans again. That'll be on Facebook.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Gross, do you have a 30-second chance to qualify?
Yeah, I do. And Dan, you're lying. You know, I've considered a lot of things, whether or not I'm for or against ballot measure 1, whether I'm for or against giving Washington, D.C. or Puerto Rico statehood. And as I've learned more about the issues as I gone along, my positions become more clear. And so I was not fully informed back when I said that. And you're right, once upon a time I did. But I have given this a lot of thought. I've spoken with a lot of people, and I don't believe that we should expand the number of states in our country.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Gross and Senator Sullivan. Our next question will again be for all candidates. Senate candidates will start us off this time, Dr. Gross, then Senator Sullivan, then House candidates Ms. Galvin and Congressman Young. You will have 60 seconds to respond. According to the U.S. Department of the Interior, Alaska's complex geological history has resulted in known or potential occurrences of many strategic and critical elements that are vital to national defense, renewable energy, and emerging electronics technologies. Both extraction and local processing of these resources could provide extensive economic benefits for our state, though the U.S. is currently far behind in developing the processing facilities. At the same time, our member businesses take responsible development seriously, as you know. When development of resources occurs in regions which lack strict standards, the environment suffers more damage than would otherwise occur if this development of that same resource occurred here in Alaska. The question is, what specific steps should Congress take to help make Alaska a leader in safely, responsibly providing the elements for the future? Dr. Gross, you have 60 seconds.
Well, thank you. Alaska is the nation's leader when it comes to natural resources. and is second to none in the diversity and power of our resource development industry, no question. From our oil development to our rich mining economy here in Alaska, it's the driving force behind our American energy dominance. And I support development of onshore oil and gas production, both in ANWR and the National Petroleum Reserve. And I think we can continue to responsibly develop oil and gas offshore in Cook Inlet as well. We should also expand energy development here in Alaska with solar and wind so that we can lower energy costs, which will promote economic development, especially in rural Alaska, and we could potentially export renewable energy as well. As we innovate and move toward a brighter future, I will continue to do my part to further oil development and strengthen our state's economy through responsible resource extraction. We're so fortunate to have such natural resources here, and I look forward to discussing and working with you to help develop these and future projects as your next U.S. Senator. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Senator Sullivan, 60 seconds. Senator Sullivan, 60 seconds.
Sabrina, it's a huge issue. It's a bigger issue. I ran for the Senate in 2014 because Obama, Biden, and Harry Reid were shutting down our economy. With resource development, the National Democrats will do it again. My opponent will empower that. So I've kept that promise on every single thing the Obama administration and Biden did. We've reversed it. We got ANWR open. We got NPRA open. We got the Tongass roadless rule. So many issues, the King Cove Road. I have been fighting this anti-Alaska agenda. This is a huge difference between me and my opponent. He will empower it. Let me just show you this letter. This is from 1/3 of the Senate Democrats in the Senate, many of whom have donated to my opponent, saying to all the big banks, don't invest in Alaska. My opponent not only will empower this, he believes in this. He's against, he's for ballot measure 1. He's against the Donlin mine. There are so many differences here. I will fight the anti-Alaska agenda. He'll empower it. Our future is very bright on resource development. NPRA just got fully permitted.
Okay, thank you, Dan. And Ms. Galvin, 60 seconds.
Thank you. Our vast state is rich in a diverse bounty of resources, from oil and gas on the North Slope and Cook Inlet, fishing along the coastlines, timber in the Southeast, and mining just about everywhere. We are blessed with opportunities, and we'll be able to provide for ourselves and for others for generations if we retain our safe exploration and development that we have happening and have planned in the future. We do it well here, and this brings important jobs for our families. For this reason, ballot measure 1 would be detrimental to our state's economy and important jobs. I support exploration in the 1002 of ANWR. Currently, the Alaskan economy depends on oil and gas production for jobs and state revenue, and it will continue to be dependent for at least in the near future. Finally, I'm proud to say that my husband currently works in the oil and gas, and his company is exploring on the North Slope right now. I am encouraged by new onshore discoveries and look forward to those projects advancing through the permitting and development process and other innovative projects. I will strive to maximize Alaska high.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Galvin. And Congressman Young, wrap us up with 60 seconds.
Well, let's look at reality. I have been involved in all resource development of the state, really, very frankly, since we became the state. ANWR, that was my bill. 200-mile limit was my bill. You know, the Donlin, we encouraged Trilista to develop that. I can go on down the line. I'm a big resource development problem. But Dan and I have a big problem with, very frankly, the left-wing Socialist Party on the side now and the majority in the House. Thank God they're in the minority in the Senate. But the programs that they're proposing, that these two people say they're independents, they're not. They're beholden to the Democrat Party. Look at the money trail. And their program, the Democrat program, the socialist program, is to preclude Alaska from developing their resources, let alone on federal land, let alone even state lands. They nod their head, shake their head. That's true. They are for that group. They will be run over. If they're elected, we will lose the benefit, the state of Alaska, the resources that belong to us. We have to elect Dan Sullivan and myself for this job to get the job done as we've been doing before. And they can talk all they want, tell all the lies they want. They're really not going to be able to do the job.
Thank you, Congressman Young. Okay, we will now have our next candidate-to-candidate question. So, Congressman Young, you're up, and you have 30 seconds to ask your question.
I will tell you one thing. I'm just wondering, you keep saying I failed in the infrastructure. This state gets more money per capita than any state in the union because of my formula. We get more money this year than we did last year. How would you change the infrastructure program in the state of Alaska by being in the Congress?
Thank you very much for your question, Representative. Don, honestly, recently that's not been the case. We have to recover our power. There's some work to be done. We need to make sure that we elect somebody who's going to be in the room when these very vital decisions are happening in the next couple of years. As you know, you've never even experienced anything the likes of this in your lifetime. This has been an economic crisis that nobody else has ever experienced. And so the federal government will be making important decisions for the whole nation to get back to work. Think about it. Who will have more sway on that caucus? A dusty minority member who calls them all socialists, or an independent member of their caucus who calmly tells them how Alaska does things right and how much our schools, our kids, and our elders depend on responsible oil and gas development to survive. There is no question that I will be far more effective in moving that caucus.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Galvin. Congressman Young, do you have a 15-second response?
Again, an example that she never answered the question. She keeps saying I have failed. She can't tell me how she's going to improve upon it. I'm on that committee. I work on that committee. The state of Alaska gets more money now this year than it did last year and the year before, and it'll continue to do because I have the formula to do it. You're not even going to be on that committee. So how are you going to solve the infrastructure problem? You can't do it. That's all talk. You didn't.
Okay, thank you, Congressman Young. Elise, take 30 seconds to clarify.
Thank you. When you look at what Alaska has received over the last 10 years, and believe me, comparing that, we have good data about this, and I'll put that on my website. In fact, it already is there under the Mythbusters section. You really can't claim that. We have lost $1 billion. And look at our roads. We're the 5th worst in the nation. We're number 49 out of 50 for job growth. You know, we can talk all we want about how we're getting this award and that award, but where is Alaska today? We have some work to do so that we can take care of our families and live in dignity.
All right, thank you, Ms. Galvin. All right, you'll have 60 seconds to answer the next question, and this one's for all candidates. Senate candidates will start with Sullivan, then Dr. Gross, followed by House candidate Congressman Young and Ms. Galvin. Oh, go ahead and hold it up. You want? Okay.
I held it up. You didn't recognize it. Let's not be doing that. Now I'm going to say one thing. She keeps saying we lost.
I'm so sorry.
Okay. She said we lost $1 billion. That's another lie. We have lost no money. They keep saying $1 billion. She can't verify that. She's talking about money above the line. That's money I got when I was chairman, yes. But that is money that's not available now. It's not because I didn't get it. The state of Alaska is getting more money than it's ever got before. And don't tell story tales, Alice. I mean, it's really not becoming of you.
Okay, Ms. Galvin, you have 30 seconds to respond to that rebuttal.
Okay, Dawn, let's start with my name, Elise Galvin. Please show that kind of respect that we know Alaskans expect of all candidates running for Congress. Now, there is data that I'm happy to share on the website, like I mentioned, eliseforalaska.com, that will help illustrate what's happening right now with Alaska. And you actually know it yourselves, Alaskans, if you're watching. Unfortunately, our food lines are longer than ever. Our roads are not taken care of, like I said, the 5th worst in the nation, you know, because of the frost heaves that you're experiencing. We have a lot of work to do. I look forward to working more than full time. We are in a world pandemic and
Okay, thank you, Ms. Galvin. And Congressman Young, you have a final 15-second opportunity to conclude your rebuttal.
She still hasn't answered the question. And that's what I say. You can bounce all you want. You can write around all you want. Answer the questions.
I did.
Okay, so we will now return to where we left off with our last question. Let's see. Okay. So this is for all candidates. You will have 60 seconds to answer. We'll start with Senate candidates, Senator Sullivan, then Dr. Gross, followed by House candidates, Congressman Young, then Ms. Galvin. The coronavirus pandemic has negatively affected businesses throughout Alaska. We all hope that the disruptions which started in March would be temporary and we would all be back to normal by now. Instead, COVID-19 infections have continued to add up. Some regions are starting to reclose businesses in an attempt to prevent their hospitals from becoming overwhelmed. And the unprecedented aid packages from the federal government have been used up. Alaska has limited resources as a state, so federal assistance has even more impact here than in the lower 48. The question is, what do you think the federal government's role should be in Alaska's recovery efforts going forward? What could you do in Congress to support the needs you see? Senator Sullivan, you have 60 seconds.
Thank you, Sabrina. Just very quick on that last debate point. Elise and I are friends, but I will say the formula that Don mentioned, I know is the best in the country. I sit on the EPW committee and see that. But look, we have 1 foot in the pandemic, 1 foot in the recovery, and it's been a frustration, there's no doubt, because we're still seeing these cases pop. I worked on 3 bipartisan pieces of legislation, including the CARES Act, that helped Alaskan schools, families, small businesses, hospitals, our fishermen, and we saved probably, the estimates are about 114,000 jobs. We're still working on another package. We put forward one, another PPP program, liability reform. Chuck Schumer has filibustered that 6 times in the Senate. My opponent, he's all over the place. He called the CARES Act a bailout. Then when he was challenged with that because he was insulting Alaskan families who received it, he said he didn't do that. That was another lie, Alan. Sorry, you're not being truthful to Alaskans. And now he supports the Pelosi Heroes Bill, a disaster for Alaska.
Okay, thank you, Senator Sullivan. Dr. Gross, what do you think the federal government's role should be in Alaska's recovery efforts going forward? You have 60 seconds.
Yeah, first we need a federal government and leaders that we can trust, and we definitely can't trust Dan Sullivan, who's standing in the corner there, having just confirmed a Supreme Court justice who's committed to stripping away insurance coverage for pre-existing conditions and who is about to strike down Roe v. Wade. And part of that trust means securing Alaskans the relief they deserve. And you can argue about a word choice, Dan, but the bottom line is a lot of Alaskans are hurting and they need help. And you have not come through for Alaska. You've been reckless with COVID-19, not wearing masks. You're not acting quickly as Alaskans continue to feel the effects of COVID. And second, the CARES Act did not give Alaska its equitable share. The Alaska Native corporations are in a lengthy battle over the $160 million that you failed to deliver to them because of ambiguity in the language of the bill that you were well aware of. You went on vacation in August rather than address a second major CARES package, and you've done nothing to slow down the COVID pandemic, which I can tell you is just in the early stages. Only about 2% of Americans have tested.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gross. Senator Sullivan has requested a rebuttal opportunity. Senator Sullivan, you have 30 seconds to state your rebuttal of Dr. Gross's last answer.
So, Alan, the CARES Act for Alaska, the most per capita, top 5 of any state in the country. But I want to get to your attacks on my trustworthiness. Millions, tens of millions of dollars from your outside liberal groups. When I ran in 2014, I promised to get things done for Alaskans. We've done that. Anwar, King Cove Road, rebuilding our military, domestic violence, opioids. Those Alaskans know that I'm trustworthy, and so do the hundreds of Alaskan Marines that I've trained for combat. You're the guy who needs to look in the mirror on trustworthiness, and I'm going to continue to work for Alaskans.
Okay, let's see. Gross, Dr. Gross, you have 30 seconds to respond. Oh, you're on mute, sir.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now? Dan, you've presided over the worst economy in Alaska's history, and that was before COVID-19 even hit. You've You've failed to address the trade war that's hurting Alaska. You're in the midst of stripping away a woman's right to choose and taking away insurance coverage for pre-existing conditions. You're trying to destroy the post office, privatizing it, and you're trying to take away people's Social Security by privatizing that as well. You have not been good for Alaska, and you've done absolutely nothing to slow down the COVID pandemic, which is destroying the economy here in Alaska and is going to last for a long, long time. It needs better leadership, Dan, and you're not it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gross and Senator Sullivan. Now we will return to where we left off with our last question. Congressman Young, what do you think the federal government's role should be in Alaska's recovery efforts going forward?
First, let me say, I really will tell you, Dan Sullivan is leading this great state the right direction. He served our country. He served our country. Other people have not served their country. So I really sort of sit here and watch this nonsense again and again, and it really disturbs me. I'll go through this in my closing statement about watching all the senators have been in the state of Alaska over this time and watch the races go forth. Don't use falsehoods. Accusing a recognized military Marine, the duty he's done for this state and the other duty he's doing now, that's not fair to anybody. First, let me say, I believe the state should be controlled. I've said that before. I do believe that the CARES Act has worked. We're writing another one that will work. The HEROES Act is a disaster. It will take away the rights of Native Alaskans. Think about that if you're thinking about voting for it. You want to vote against the Alaska Natives? Go right ahead. I'm supporting them. I'm not voting for the HEROES Act, period.
Okay, thank you, Congressman Young. Ms. Galvin, what do you think the federal government's role should be in recovery efforts in Alaska?
Thank you. We must come together. We've got to start with what is needed to beat back the spread of the virus. Rapid tests right now are just arriving, frankly, 6 months too late. There should have been a war effort level of amassing production facilities for these critical items when the pandemic hit this country back in February and March. We need to get Alaskans back to work. The federal government's role will be primarily to provide lifelines for businesses, local governments, and individuals to keep the businesses and individuals from a full shutdown. And unfortunately, my opponent has been in the minority and will be in the minority and will not be able to deliver for Alaskans. When the CARES Act was being drafted even, not only was he not in the room, he wasn't even in DC. He was here in Alaska talking about the beer virus and saying he didn't want to be with those monkeys in Congress working. He didn't even show up for work. Sending Don Young back to Congress for these 2 years is as good as sending someone who doesn't even have a vote, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Galvin. So thank you all for that. We do have a follow-up question, or I should say I do, for each of you based on your answer to the last question. So you'll have 30 seconds to respond. So Senator Sullivan, what specific assistance will you fight to see included in the next recovery bill? You have 30 seconds. You have 30 seconds.
So Sabrina, it's what's in our current bill that we put forward. It's another PPP program. It's a child care. It's $100 billion for school. It's money, significant money for child care. It's $500 million more for the Fisherman's Fund that I got in the original CARES Act, although my opponent derides that. And it's liability reform for small businesses and hospitals. My opponent is for the HEROES Act. It is a disaster. $3 trillion, as Don said, anti-Alaska Native, a tax break for the wealthiest Americans. His neighbors in California will get a huge tax break. So that's not.
Okay, thank you, Senator Sullivan. Dr. Gross, so as a former small businessman, what can you tell us about the ultimate effects of the Paycheck Protection Program? Okay, I see that you have a rebuttal. Can we answer this follow-up question and then do your rebuttal, please? What can you tell us about the ultimate effects of the Paycheck Protection Program and the emergency small business loans that have been distributed up to this point? You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think they're really, really important. The fact of the matter is, with COVID-19, there are some jobs that people will not be able to return back to because of the safety of the situation, and they're going to need money in their pockets to help get through this pandemic. The next CARES package needs to not only provide for them, but also needs an infrastructure package to include broadband internet expansion across the state so that people have opportunities to work virtually in places that they didn't have opportunities before. I think that's really, really important, and that should be in conjunction with a public option, allowing people to buy into.
Okay, interesting, thank you. Okay, now Dr. Gross has requested a rebuttal opportunity. So you have 30 seconds to state your rebuttal of Senator Sullivan's last answer.
Yeah, Dan, you keep making up lies about California. And the fact of the matter is, I have a rental home in California that Monica and I lived in for 2 winters while we were full-time students at UCLA getting our master's in public health, all the while remaining an Alaska resident and being eligible for the permanent fund dividend and commuting back and forth to Alaska to work as a doctor and to work in the summers as a fisherman. Like everything, you're making all kinds of things up to paint lies about me that are completely not true. And unlike you, Dan, my family, your family, on the other hand, does direct business with the communist government of China. Your multi-billion-dollar family's.
Okay, Senator Sullivan, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Look, there's a bigger issue here. Alan Gross attacks people's families and other issues because he has no agenda. They've spent over almost $30 million in this race from outside liberal groups. Have you heard once from Alan Gross's view on what the positive agenda is for Alaska? No, because the hardcore left doesn't have one. They have an anti-Alaska agenda, anti-Second Amendment, anti-resource development, anti-military. That's what Alaska will get if he's elected and Schumer becomes Senate Majority Leader. That's the biggest issue in this campaign.
Okay, thank you, Senator Sullivan. Dr. Gross, you do have a final 15 seconds to conclude your rebuttal.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, Dan, you obviously haven't read my website and you don't know anything about what I'm about. I'm all about bringing jobs and restoring economic growth back to the state, which is something you've absolutely failed on. With a public option, people will be able to move to the state with affordable care, health care. We can expand broadband. We can get people to work.
Okay, great. Thank you for that rebuttal opportunity. So we'll now move into a rapid fire round of yes, no questions. You should have your yes, Ms. Galvin?
I don't believe we answered the question as both senators have, or have you chosen to only have them answer that question? I'm not sure how that goes.
No, you are correct. Thank you. Thank you. So as a follow-up to the pandemic question, Ms. Galvin, what information would you need access to in order to make specific recommendations for how the federal government could help Alaska's recovery efforts? And you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I think it's important that we listen to the local leaders to understand, first of all, which businesses, what sorts of businesses are needing the lifelines. We need to get them back in order. We need to make sure nobody's shutting down. That's going to be key. We know that there are some critical pieces of healthcare that have not yet been delivered, things like the rapid tests that must be available so that we can bring back the cruise ships, bring back all of the important businesses that would be able to be alive if the consumers felt more security in what's happening right now. So those are the things that I'd like to know, is what exactly.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Galvin. Congressman Young, a follow-up to your pandemic answer. What is your specific recovery goal for the next 6 months?
First, let me show you I am bipartisan. I happen to agree with my opponent, everything she said, and that's my stand.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, now we'll move on to our rapid fire round. You should have your red and green cards in front of you. The green card has a check mark to indicate yes, and the red card has an X to indicate no. If you don't have those cards, please just do a thumbs up or a thumbs down. For each question, please hold up the card that corresponds with your answer and then keep it up for just a moment until all candidates have responded. First, we'll start with a softball warm-up question. Since the pandemic began, have you or have you not attended an online meeting while wearing work clothes on top and loungewear on the bottom? Okay, thank you. Okay, now it looks like we have about 5 rapid fire questions. When you know that you are entering a business where you will need to stand within 6 feet of other Fairbanks area residents, do you wear a face mask? Great, good to see. Okay, next up, ballot measure 1 on the November 3rd general election ballot would increase the state tax on oil production and discourage future investment by oil companies in Alaska. Would you encourage someone listening today to vote for this initiative? Okay, thank you. Do you support increasing the state's outdated motor fuel tax to fund our state's infrastructure needs? Increased motor fuel tax, support or no? Okay, thank you. Would you support implementing a broad-based tax, such as a state income or sales tax, to pay for state services if current revenue does not cover our existing programs? Okay, thank you. Okay, now I'm going to read off a list of projects at varying stages of consideration for Alaska. Use your yes/no cards to indicate if you support each one. All right, first project, a road from the Ambler Mining District to the Dalton Highway. All right, 4 for 4. Next project, the Alaska to Alberta Railroad, or A2A as it's called, connecting Canada to our existing rail system. Wonderful. All right, how about a deep water port in Nome? All right, does this sit in a river dam? Okay. And lastly, a natural gas pipeline from the North Slope to South Central Alaska. Okay. All right, you all agreed. You should give yourselves a virtual hug on that one. Okay, you will have 60 seconds to answer the next question for all candidates. We will start with House candidates this time. Ms. Galvin, you'll go first, followed by Congressman Young. Then we'll have the Senate candidates answer it, Dr. Gross, then Senator Sullivan. From meetings to school and entertainment to medical appointments, this year has seen a huge portion of our lives move online. It has highlighted how far Alaska has come in connecting our communities, but also how far we still have to go. We happen to have Fairbanks Chamber members within a 15-minute drive from our Chamber's downtown Fairbanks office who have trouble connecting to committee meetings because they do not have access to high-speed internet at home. Broadband is no longer a nice-to-have thing. It is now the way many of us are conducting our primary business activities, interacting with our friends and neighbors, calling upon our government, and educating our future workforce. The question is, if broadband internet is now essential infrastructure, how can the federal government assist with expanding access to all Alaskans? Ms. Galvin, you have 60 seconds. Oh, you're on mute.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for this question. I've been a broadband champion for expanding, for access for years now. Expanding is critical for Alaska's economic future. Opportunities in telehealth, teleeducation, and wealth of our economic opportunities throughout Alaska, especially in innovations. It's critical for our national security. The federal government will be a key stakeholder in growing our broadband network. It should be considered as essential infrastructure that I will demand that we be included in any national infrastructure package. Fully expanding our capabilities will also require federal assistance to facilitate expansion of satellite service to Alaska when necessary. Finally, As we expand our military and Coast Guard presence in the Arctic, this is going to be critical. And I will have the opportunity to achieve this as an independent member in the majority with the ability to eventually move into a committee chair, something that my opponent can no longer do, both because he'll be in the minority and he's termed out of eligibility to chair his committees.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Galvin. Congressman Young, you have 60 seconds.
Well, first, let's take credit for what's been done. We just got a $50 million grant for broadband from Kodiak down then to Alaska. We're working on one in Southeast. Senator Sullivan and I have been working very hard on this through the military end of it. We're working to make sure it happens. We're in the catbird seat, and I'm a little bit concerned about my opponent talking about being the majority. The majority isn't forever. I've been in the majority, been in the minority, minority. It goes back and forth. So I respectfully say I will be in the majority again. And then when I do, I'll get jobs done that you won't be able to do if you were to get elected. I don't think that's going to happen. But the reality is broadband has been here for quite a while. We just have to expand it. Ted Stevens and I worked on this for Medicare, medical assistance through the broadband. We've done a good job. We're going to do a better job. We're working with GCI and the other service people. We can do that. So I'm there. I'm in a catbird seat. You people aren't.
Okay. Thank you, Congressman Young. And Ms. Galvin has requested a rebuttal opportunity. Ms. Galvin, you'll have 30 seconds to state your rebuttal of Congressman Young's, last answer.
Okay, thank you. And Congressman Young, thank you for your work, especially your work with Senator Ted Stevens. Here again is a place where I agree with you and I honor you for your work. I really do. But now we're facing new challenges, and it's important that we have someone in the room who's proud to have said, I've used my computer, my laptop for years and years, and I've texted people, and unfortunately you haven't. And we need somebody now to not refer to tubes in the skies and things like that, but what is the future for Alaska's economy? And this is the time to have a new voice, and I'll be grateful to be there. Thank you.
Congressman Young, you have 30 seconds to respond.
I'm very proud of what I'm able to do. She can take and make fun of me. I haven't got myself in trouble by sending pictures. I can remember some people have done that. I am one that has hired the best in the world, and they do a great job for me. We keep in contact with Alaskans. I had over 100,000 Alaskans contact my office and being answered last year. We're in contact with the state more than anybody else. And I have a little experience. Some people I know don't have any experience at all in elective office.
Okay, thank you, Congressman. Ms. Galvin, you have a final 15-second opportunity to conclude your rebuttal.
Thank you. It's time for a new voice. And I'm an independent, and that includes my access to information. I won't be dependent on what staff is willing to share with me. I was on a teletown hall with over 1,500 rural Alaskans on Sunday while you were on with Trump. I'll be listening, and I want to make sure that the rural Alaskans can be on this sort of a device instead of on a telephone. Unfortunately.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Galvin. Okay, so now I'll return to where we left off with my last question about internet infrastructure. So Dr. Gross, you have 60 seconds. The question is, if broadband internet is now essential infrastructure, how can the federal government assist with expanding access to all Alaskans?
Well, broadband internet presents a tremendous opportunity for our state. And as we see the pandemic driving an increasing number of jobs virtual, it's absolutely critical that we expand broadband access across Alaska for not only employment, but for educational opportunities, as I'm standing here in Fairbanks and I see the University of Alaska Fairbanks. To attract new businesses and residents and to support current ones, we have to provide fast connections to broadband. This will allow Alaskans to stay competitive in the workforce, will help to rebuild our dwindling economy, and will be a major point of has been a major point of my campaign from the very beginning. And there was a bill that was introduced in 2019 to establish the Office of Rural Broadband, but unfortunately Dan Sullivan's committee has not advanced that bill. We need to move these bills like this forward so that we can expand broadband throughout the state and not just sit in the corner and be quiet.
Thank you, Dr. Gross. Senator Sullivan, 60 seconds. Dr. Gross, Senator Sullivan, 60 seconds.
Well, Sabrina, I think you're seeing here pretty broad-based bipartisan support for broadband. I agree with most of what's been said, not everything, of course, but we have been working hard on it. You know, under my guidance on the Commerce Committee, the Federal Communications Act put forward what was called the Alaska Plan. That was a plan for the FCC solely focused on our state, $1 billion over 10 years to our telecommunications companies to close the digital divide. As Don mentioned, we just had a $50 million USDA grant for Southeast, but also importantly for the Aleutian Island chain. I've been the #1 advocate for the E-rate program that gets broadband out to our schools and our rural communities. And in the CARES Act, I've introduced legislation, bipartisan legislation, the COVID broadband extension bill. So this is all important work we got to do. And I agree with Elise that the military, Coast Guard also presents great opportunities. I just got in the defense bill a low Earth orbit satellite provision that will have a military and commercial application for rural broadband.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Okay, thank you all for those responses. Our next candidate-to-candidate question is now. Dr. Gross, you have 30 seconds to ask your question. Senator Sullivan, you will have 30 seconds to answer.
Yeah, Dan, how could you vote to allow the president to divert $102 million from Fairbanks military projects? I'm standing here in Fairbanks right now at the IBEW 1547 Labor Hall, and I can tell you that the hotels here in Fairbanks are nearly empty or are boarded up, and it's very clear Fairbanks could have used the business. How could you have voted against that?
Senator, you have 60 seconds to respond. 60 seconds to respond.
Well, look, Alan, one of the issues that I ran on was the Obama-Biden administration cutting defense spending by 25%. As the colonel in the Marines, who knows a heck of a lot about our military, my #1 issue that I promised Alaskans was to rebuild our military. We have done that nationally, and we have certainly done that in the great state of Alaska. $1.6 billion in military construction, Don Young and I and Lisa Murkowski have secured just in the last 4 years. This is great for our national security, but it's also great for jobs. We're going to continue to build on that. And with regard to the border wall, yes, there was some money because the Democrats were not good on border security, but Don Young and I have gotten almost all of that, only $8 million of the 100 that has come back to Alaska. So the key issue here is, again, in this election, the National Democrats are going to gut our military if they get power. You pledge your allegiance to Schumer. I debated him and Bernie Sanders recently on a military bill. We got to continue strong military in Alaska. Your part.
Senator, your time is up. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Gross, do you have a 15-second response?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, first of all, I'm a very strong supporter of the military. There's a whole lot more to national security than our Department of Defense. And look no farther than right here in Fairbanks, which is being devastated by the COVID-19. You've defunded our public health, and our country was completely ill-prepared for the COVID-19 pandemic and continues to handle it very, very, very poorly.
Okay, thank you. Senator Sullivan, 30 seconds to clarify. 30 seconds to clarify.
Look, this is the key issue, one of the key issues. We're rebuilding our military. I was just on a debate in the NDAA on the Senate floor. Bernie Sanders, who you donated to, and Chuck Schumer, who you pledged allegiance to, put an amendment on the floor called the Defund the Military Amendment. That's what they called it. 14% across the board cuts. My colleagues asked me to debate Sanders. I beat him badly, 75-25. But if they get power, and you'll empower them if you're elected, they will crush our military, and that'll be.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Okay, thank you all. Okay, now we have 2 more prepared questions for all candidates and 1 more candidate-to-candidate question. Audience, this would be your final reminder. If you have a question you would like to have asked, please submit it in the chat box now. Audience questions will be selected before we complete the final prepared question. Candidates, you'll have 45 seconds to respond to the next question. We will start with the House, Congressman Young, then Ms. Galvin, followed by the Senate, Senator Sullivan, then Dr. Gross. Good segue here. Military investment is a particularly noticeable economic contributor in interior Alaska, but it also contributes to Alaska's economy as a whole. Defense spending in Alaska was $3.5 billion in 2018 alone. The recent decision to base F-35 aircraft at Eielson Air Force Base has created a surge of economic activity when our region really needed it most. Now, Alaska is in consideration for additional opportunities such as the KC-46 aircraft and the new Space Force headquarters. That just gave me goosebumps. The question is, what is your vision for the military presence in Alaska, and how can you help accomplish this vision as a member of Congress? Congressman Young, you have 45 seconds.
Well, first, let me say I was been involved with the F-35s. I put the language in the defense bill way back, so the only place they could put them would be in Fairbanks, and I'm proud of that fact. And Dan Sullivan followed through, and he's done a great job. He is a Marine. He does know the military, and we know the effect. I have to say one thing. Wainwright, by the way, was going to be BRAC. We stopped that. Jim Dotson and myself and the Fairbanks delegation stopped that. I'm proud of that. Fort Greely was going to be BRAC. We stopped that, made the largest missile defense base in the state of Alaska in the United States. So we're well aware of the importance. We are where Billy Mitchell said, he who controls Alaska controls the continent and controls the globe. So I'm excited about that. We have a good team back there, understands the military, and I'll continue to work to get it done.
Thank you, Congressman. Okay, Ms. Galvin.
Boy, U.S. national security depends on an increase in military presence in Alaska. I'm grateful to say, because good things are on the way. The Arctic will be one of the most contested areas of the globe in the coming century as the climate change opens opportunities and threats due to new shipping and commercial channels. We're already seeing it. We need to just keep reminding everyone in Congress that the Arctic is critical for national security, and the nation needs to invest in increasing military capabilities in Alaska. We have a lot to offer the nation. Our current bases need to be supported and expanded, but also need increased Coast Guard and Navy bases all along the Arctic coast. 1 in 10 Alaskans are military. Expanding the military in Alaska and hammering the strategic importance of the Arctic will be critical requirement of any member of the Alaska delegation to work with.
Thank you, Ms. Galvin. All right, Senator Sullivan, what is your vision for the military presence in Alaska?
Well, I first want to thank the leaders of Fairbanks and North Pole, because they've had so much to do with this huge buildup as well. But this is a giant difference between me, my opponent, and the national parties. I chair the Readiness Subcommittee on the Armed Services Committee, and we have been responsible for this huge rebuilding nationally and in Alaska. 1.6 billion F-35s. We've authorized 6 polar class icebreakers. The NDAA this year has $200 million more just for Fairbanks. We're going to continue this. I had the Secretary of the Air Force, the Secretary of the Army, Secretary of the Navy in Alaska. Just in the last 3 months, they are all bullish on more investment in Alaska, but the election will be critical. The National Democrats want to gut the military. My opponent, who knows very little about the military, will empower them. That will be very bad for our state and our country.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Dr. Gross, your turn.
Yeah, if you chair the Readiness Committee, perhaps you could have let American fishermen fishing in the Bering Sea know that there were going to be Russian live fire exercises, and instead they were caught completely by surprise, and it was terrifying. Alaska is at the epicenter of national security, and a strong military presence here is necessary. And while I thank Dan Sullivan for his service as a Marine, I would never hide in the corner like he did when our president calls out our nation's heroes, losers, suckers, and cowards, and I would hold hearings about Russian bounties on the heads of our active duty military. Dan voted to allow the president to divert more than $100 million in construction projects away from Fairbanks for a medieval wall thousands of miles away. Only one of those Coast Guard breakers that you're talking about has actually been appropriated, and it's heading to Antarctica, Dan, not the Arctic. We need a base in Nome. We need Coast.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gross. Okay, so our final candidate-to-candidate question will be asked by Ms. Galvin. You'll have 30 seconds to ask your question, and Congressman Young, you'll have 60 seconds to answer her question.
Thank you, Sabrina. Dawn, our national debt has been skyrocketing with your support. 3 years ago, as part of the Tax Relief Act, you supported a massive cut to corporate tax rates and tax giveaways to the wealthy. You oppose closing loopholes and restoring fairness in our tax system. What are you going to do to get the national debt under control?
Well, first, let me say I'm not going to do that. You know, I didn't do it to begin with. I voted for ANWR, and you say you're going to repeal that. It give every Alaskan taxpayer $2,800 tax break if you're a working person. So what you're saying in your programs, you're going to repeal the so-called Trump tax package that had ANWR in it. So I'm going to keep it there. When I'm reelected, we'll keep that tax structure. We're working well. The economy was really strong before we had the pandemic. So I have to possess one thing. When you say I didn't vote for this, I didn't vote for that, we had one vote, and that was on the passage of the bill, and I voted for it and was proud of it. Actually, was down at the White House to sign it. So I'm proud of the ANWR in it. You're going to be against ANWR. You say you want to repeal that tax. That's in your brochure. You know that. And everybody knows that the party that you're going to belong to, whether you agree with it or not, you will belong to that party is going to raise taxes. It's there. Joe Biden wants to raise taxes on every working person, wants to stop down and stomp our economy in Alaska, make our oil industry outdated, and turn around and raise taxes. We won't have an economy in Alaska if Joe Biden and you are elected.
Okay, thank you, Congressman. Ms. Galvin, do you have a 15-second response?
Boy, after 47 years, you seem to not understand that repealing the tax cuts on the wealthy doesn't include ANWR. Dawn, let's stick to the facts. I support ANWR. You know that. I'm an oil and gas family, and I do not support raising any taxes. You've been in office for quite a long time and the country has spent trillions of debt. We've really saddled future generations so much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Galvin. Congressman, you have 30 seconds to clarify.
You know, really clarification. She is for raising taxes if she repeals those taxes. You're not going to separate them out with Nancy Pelosi nor with Chuck Schumer. Let's be realistic about this. Alaskans, wake up. If you want to stop this economy, you vote for the two people that are running against Dan and I. That's what they want to do. They say they don't, but reality is that's what they will do, because Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Shifty Schiff and all the people you got money from, and you did get money from them. I've got the record. You know it. And if you believe in getting money from them, very frankly, you know what you're for.
Okay, thank you, Congressman. Okay, for our final prepared question, you will have 60 seconds to respond. The order will be Senate candidates, then House candidates. As the farthest north transportation hub in the United States, Fairbanks stands ready to contribute to economic, community, and infrastructure development in America's Arctic, as well as national defense needs. What do you see as the role of the Arctic in U.S. policy, and how does Fairbanks fit into it? Dr. Gross, you're up first.
Well, thank you. In my next plan, I've laid out a comprehensive Arctic strategic initiative, and it has two parts. First, the hard power. This is the defense that our servicemen and women provide day to day, and we definitely need to strengthen our Coast Guard presence in the Arctic while supporting the ground force and the Air Force here in Fairbanks. Second, we need the diplomatic effort, and that includes the ratification of the Law of the Sea Treaty. And right now, China and Russia and many other countries are staking legal claims in areas around or outside of our exclusive economic zone in the Arctic because we haven't ratified the treaty and we're bobbing up and down in the water while others are driving the boat. The tax considerations of that bill have long since been addressed.
Okay, thank you. Senator Sullivan? Sullivan?
Thank you, Sabrina. The 21st century is the Arctic century, and I think we need to seize the opportunity, and we're finally making progress. You know, again, one of the reasons I ran, the Obama-Biden administration had a 13-page strategy on the Arctic. I held it up in a confirmation hearing, said, this is a joke. This is a joke. Since then, I've made sure every defense bill has a very strong focus on the Arctic. The Department of Defense, all the services are putting forward Arctic strategies. We're building icebreakers. Yes, Alan, We've authorized 6, and they're coming to Alaska. That's why I had the Secretary of the Navy here recently. We hadn't built one in over 40 years. Missile defense. And by the way, we have a strategic Arctic port now in the Environment and Public Works bill, the WRDA bill, the ports bill. We have a $500 million strategic port for the people of Nome. Ask the people of Nome how much progress we've made. University of Fairbanks, we've had the Ted Stevens Center, DoD Center for the Study of the Arctic. The Department of Energy is now establishing an Arctic Center at UAF. We have enormous opportunities. We're making progress. It's great for the future.
Okay, thank you, Senator Sullivan. Ms. Galvin, what do you see as the role of the Arctic in U.S. policy? Oh, you're on mute.
We mentioned earlier, the Arctic will be central in the coming years, and we are in a really important space geopolitically. We need to take advantage of that attention and get the funding that we need. One of the cornerstones of my campaign is the need for a major national infrastructure bill that would provide funding for the roads, ports, and other infrastructure throughout the Arctic. Climate change is a huge challenge for Alaska, but it is also a tremendous opportunity. As new shipping routes open up, new resource development becomes feasible, and the U.S. interests in the Arctic and enhancing our national capacity is undeniable. We must ensure the work at UAF is bolstered, not depleted, because it's important to Alaskans and the world. The Geophysical Institute, Cold Climate Housing Research Center, the Energy Center, we're all on the cutting edge of research and developing and delivering models of how to mitigate climate change impacts. So we need to strike during the upcoming period of national investment and secure Alaska's share. I will be in the room as a member of the majority to make sure Alaska gets what is needed to secure our nation.
Thank you, Ms. Galvin. Okay, Congressman Young.
Well, let's make it clear, my opponent will be in the room with the Democrats, and they're against anything in the Arctic, and that's reality. Now, let's say I've been in this business, yes, a long time, but we've done a lot. When I first started, we had 2 Coast Guard stations. Now we got 8 big Coast Guard stations, biggest one in Kodiak. And we're getting the money for the icebreakers, as Dan Sullivan has said. We're working on filling in a Nome port. I've also got a proposal to help build a road to Blossom Point in Kotzebue. We're actually looking at an offshore port in up north in Barrow, because the water is really shallow there. We're well aware of what's happening in the Arctic. In fact, I was able to get an assistant secretary to the Arctic now in the Defense Department. That's the first time that's been recognized. They know what's happening. We're there. We're very active. The delegation is making sure the Arctic in Alaska will be served by everybody, military, economically, and by the people for the good of Alaska and the good of this nation. I've been there, I've done it, and I'm going to continue to do it.
Okay, thank you, Congressman Young. Okay, now we're going to take a couple of questions from the audience. Candidates, you'll have 30 seconds to respond to the first question. The order will be Senator Sullivan, Dr. Gross, Congressman Young, Ms. Galvin. The question is, when you are faced with a complex decision where there are really no easy answers, how do you approach your decision-making process? Senator Sullivan? Senator Sullivan?
Well, what I've tried to do throughout my career is get to the people who know it and get home. Get home. Ask people in Alaska what they think, how we can work together on an issue that's complex, weigh the pros and cons, and then take action. One of the things that I'm proud about in my first term is I made promises. We worked together as Alaskans, and then we started getting things done, big things done, whether on domestic violence, more law enforcement, ANWR, rebuilding our military. And that was done with all Alaskans and our delegation acting together.
Okay, great. Dr. Gross?
Yeah, well, thank you. I will always do what's best for Alaska and put Alaska first. I'll listen to the people around me and always be thinking about how I can best help the state. And my opponent keeps saying I'm going to be enabling Schumer and Pelosi, but that's absurd. The only people I'm enabling are Alaskans. Dan's enabling the worst economy in Alaska's history. And don't listen to all the things that he's done for Alaska. Look around you and see our economy and see COVID. Or see healthcare. It's an absolute disaster here. We need change, and we need it now.
Thank you, Dr. Gross. Congressman Young?
Well, let's think about this a moment. You know, I will listen to Alaska, have listened to Alaska, Passed 83 bills. Most of those bills are from Alaskans' ideas. I continue to do that. Where we disagree, I will tell them I disagree. I think that's very important. Sometimes I will not support something against something I don't believe in. I'll let them know. But this is a communication process, and we've done it very well. You check out the communication. In fact, Alaskans will tell you, if you want to get something done, go to the delegation of Alaska. And they do that across the board, but mainly Alaskans come to me, the only congressman for Alaska.
Okay, and Ms. Galvin.
I agree with most of what's been said. I look to the experts to understand the problem and the options, as well as the pros and the cons of those options. And then I turn to Alaskans to understand how the problem and the options will affect our lives. And then I will do what is best for Alaskans. But we need to base it on facts, not politics. They need to come together. Listening to Alaskans through modern technology and through the old-fashioned phone, I'm proud to say that I'll be running and how I serve. I'll not take a dime from any corporate PACs. I'm not beholden to anyone but Alaska.
All right, thank you, Ms. Galvin. Okay, our second audience question, you also each have 30 seconds to respond. And it's a question from our 5th grade cohort right here at Spruce Tree, who's out to recess now. They snuck out. They couldn't help it, I guess, at this point. So they asked, how are you planning to help our schools? Some of us have been in school since June. Other of our friends cannot go back. What's the best path forward for the U.S. education system? The order will be Ms. Galvin, then Congressman Young, Dr. Gross, then Senator Sullivan. Ms. Galvin? Oh, you're on mute.
Unmuted.
Thank you for the question. I'm so grateful that there are many schools who have worked to find ways to stay safe and work with their community and the families and the educators to ensure that we keep learning happening, whether it's in school, at homes, or in other bubbles that they've developed. We've got to beat back COVID-19. We need the resources right now, such as the rapid tests and other capital investments to make sure that all can be back in school. It's just necessary. And I know that homeschooling is also happening, and that's wonderful where it's possible, but we've got to do the right thing for every student so that there's parity, and this definitely.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Galvin. Okay, 30 seconds to you, Congressman Young.
Well, first, let me say, I don't believe the federal government should be setting the standards in education. I think it should be local, state and local especially. And I've said this before, I don't think the answer is throwing money at the program. Yes, we need some dollars, but why are we so low on our educational rate? We got some great kids, we got some good teachers, but we're not doing the job we should do. And why the federal government keeps saying it's all the problem? I think the state has to wake up, the communities have to wake up, and let's get our kids educated.
Thank you, Congressman. Dr. Gross?
Well, excuse me. I believe public money should stay in the public system, and unlike my opponent who's trying to divert it into the private system to make our public system worse, I'm a very, very strong proponent of our public educational system, but right now it's really challenged with our COVID pandemic, and my opponent's doing a terrible job getting that under control. That'll be my first priority when I get to the Senate. And we need broadband, because I have friends who are teachers who are trying to teach to students who don't have access to internet, where a third are being taught by paper, a third in person, and a third by broadband that they don't have. We need to get the pandemic under
Thank you, Dr. Gross. Senator, thank you, Dr. Gross. Dr. Sullivan, 30 seconds. Dr. Sullivan, 30 seconds.
I'm going to continue to be the champion for E-rate, for our broadband, for our schools. And we need to move forward on the package that we put on the Senate floor. We have $100 billion, the biggest amount of money in that package on the Senate floor right now. Chuck Schumer, who my opponent has pledged allegiance to, has filibustered that 6 times. That's just horrible. Now, the next thing that we need to do is continue to follow through on the Every Student Succeeds Act. That was bipartisan legislation that we got done in 2016 that will bring power back to our communities, our teachers, and state, not the feds running our schools.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Okay, we have time for just one more audience question. You'll have 30 seconds to respond. The order will be Congressman Young, you'll go first, then Ms. Galvin, then Senator, and then Dr. Gross. The question is, 5 of Senator Sullivan, Dr. Gross. Of the 6 largest U.S. banks have pledged over the past year to develop.
And here.
Sabrina,
Okay, let me reread that. 5 of the 6. Okay, Janelle just put it in the chat. 5 of the 6 largest U.S. banks have pledged over the past year to end funding for new drilling and exploration projects in the Arctic. Do you think those pledges will impede progress to develop ANWR?
I think there's a lot of money out there for investment in the Arctic. This is the last of it we have. I think it's going to be going forth. I'm fairly disappointed, and the banks that say no to ANWR and give money to China to develop oil. That's Joe Biden again. And I say that very respectfully. They're involved. They're supporting China. They're not supporting America or the state of Alaska or the federal government that they can develop our oil.
Sabrina, shall I go ahead? I'm not hearing you, but I'm assuming it's.
Thank you, Congressman. Ms. Galvin?
Yeah, the action by the banks is disappointing, but it should not impede progress on ANWR or other Arctic drilling unless it spreads to other forms of financing. Most project financing is done without the participation of these types of institutions, but we have to be really vigilant, and such blind blanket actions don't spread to other providers of capital. That is why it is so critical to have a voice in the room who can explain that Alaska does oil and gas development right. And any global effort to affect climate change should encourage oil and gas in Alaska rather than other places in the world that don't have our standards. And unfortunately, my opponent would not be in the room, whereas I would be. And so this is important that we have an independent voice speaking for our families to make sure that we keep our jobs in the room. This moment really reminds us of how important that is. Well, here's where broadband comes into play.
Moment to make sure.
you sure? Okay. Okay. Sabrina, I think I'm up. Look, this is another
Nothing
huge
changed,
issue. Again,
so.
over 1/3 of this.
Well, hold on just a moment here. Can everybody hear me? Okay. All right, great. All right. So, yes, Senator Sullivan, it's your turn. Thank you, Ms. Galvin.
So Sabrina, as I mentioned, over 1/3 of the Senate Democrats, all of whom are funding my opponent, have wrote all the big banks to hurt Alaska. It's outrageous. I've been fighting back against them. My opponent will empower them, and I've been fighting back against the banks. I've written all the banks, and I got federal regulators to go after the banks because the banks are discriminating against Alaska. So I'm taking a leadership role on this issue. The Wall Street Journal just did a big piece highlighting the work that I've been doing but we have to fight back against these banks. My opponents, allies in the Senate would empower this. I'll continue to fight it.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Dr. Gross?
Yeah, well, that's a nice prop, Dan, and I'm sure if you read the fine print, you're diverting another $102 million away from Fairbanks capital projects. I'm a strong proponent of development in ANWR. I've been so from the start of this campaign, but the fact of the matter is there won't be any development in ANWR if we can't get the price of oil up and the worldwide demand up. And the only way we're going to do that is to control COVID-19 and get the economy back rolling. You've got no plan to do that. I know how to do that. I'm a doctor, Dan. I've got a plan.
All right, thank you all. That concludes our audience questions. That also concludes our prepared questions. So we're ready for your closing statements. To conclude our forum today, we'll give you each 60 seconds to give closing remarks. We'll start with the Senate candidates, Dr. Gross and Senator Sullivan, then conclude with the House candidates, Ms. Galvin and Congressman Young. All right, Dr. Gross.
Well, thank you to the Fairbanks Chamber for the opportunity to speak here today. This campaign has been about one simple thing. Who can you trust to put Alaska first? Ever since Dan Sullivan showed up in Alaska, things have gotten worse. We have the highest healthcare costs in the world. Millions of funds for Alaska's military bases have been diverted away, and our university and our schools are being cut instead of growing. And now oil demand and prices are low, and our tourism industry is suffering terribly because of Dan's continued failure to address COVID. Dan has had 10 years in Juneau and DC to bring jobs and economic growth to this state, but he's wasted his opportunity. And instead, his family's multi-billion-dollar company makes millions of dollars from doing direct business with the Chinese Communist government. And he's been trying to take away and dismantle our healthcare system right in the midst of a pandemic. It's time for a change. Alaska deserves a senator who not only understands your issues, but has lived them. So if you're ready for a doctor who cares, who will always put our state above partisan politics, then I'm your guy. I hope I can earn your vote on November 3rd. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gross. Senator Sullivan. Thank you, Dr. Gross. Senator Sullivan.
Well, thank you to the chamber. I love this community. Julie and I were married in Fairbanks over 26 years ago, starting our family here. And inspired by my in-laws, Bud and Mary Jane Fate, and my own parents, Julie and I focused on a life of family, integrity, and service to our community. In the few months my opponent has been on the scene, dozens of respected Alaskans like Lisa Murkowski, Don Young, John Sturgeon have called him out for his dishonesty and lies, and you've seen more today directly to all of you. His campaign has been fueled by over $25 million from lower 48 liberals who have one goal in mind: Chuck Schumer to be Senate Majority Leader. Gross fully supports this goal, which would be a disaster for Alaska because they'll institute their anti-Alaska agenda. Our agenda is better: to build on the historic progress we've made, opening ANWR, NPRA, rebuilding our military, especially in the interior, more law enforcement, access to lands, federal judges will defend our Second Amendment, and seizing opportunities that the Arctic century presents to us. The choice is clear. We need to move forward together. I'd be honored by your vote.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Ms. Galvin.
Thank you. Don, I just wanted to, first of all, clarify, Don's entire attack on me is that I will be beholden to folks who provided less than 5% of my fundraising. However, over 90% of my funds come from individuals, and I've raised more from individual Alaskans than anyone previously: Republicans, Democrats, independent, any candidates. If anyone is beholden, it's Don Young, who gets 60% of his funds from corporations, not even in Alaska. Look, this isn't even about the race between Don and me. I'm going to be honest. I'm very worried about the future of Alaska. We're facing challenges that we have literally never faced in the past. Changing energy resources, changing economy, and then COVID on top of that. What might have worked in the last 47 years is not working now. We cannot afford someone who is not delivering or advocating for Alaska because he is not in a position to deliver. We cannot afford another 2 years of Don Young, respectfully. We need to right this ship.
Thank you, Ms. Galvin. Congressman Young, your closing statement, please.
Thanks for the Fairbanks Chamber. I wished I was there with you. You know, I want to talk about who can best do the job. You all know me. You know what I do. You know how I can do it. I've done it. It's been done. I'll continue to do it. I've got the fire in the belly. It's not time for change. It's time for somebody that knows how to do the job. We don't want somebody brand new in a job that doesn't know what they're doing, never held an elective office. I'd like to say one thing, though. I have been through 8 senators. I've never seen such negativism from the opponent that's running against the seated senator. Even when Mark Begich ran against Ted Stevens, I never heard the lies that I'm hearing from the opponent to Dan Sullivan. I know Dan Sullivan. He is honest. He is a person who leads the state, recognizes the state, is important to the state, and happens to be married to one of my best friends, Julie. You know, her mother was a friend of mine. Her mother was my girlfriend. So I'm saying I know him. I know what he can do. I watched him work. I know he's right for the state. You don't want to get rid of Dan Sullivan. He's what the difference between dark and night. If you elect his opponent, it'll be dark. And when you elect Dan Sullivan, it'll be light. We'll be able to take and do the job for Alaska as we've been able to do it for the last 6 years.
Thank you, Congressman Young. And on those closing statements, I'd like to thank you all once again for participating in our 2020 online political forum. We appreciate your flexibility and your willingness to try this new online format with us. Thank you also to our audience for informing yourselves about the coming election in this unusual year. If you requested an absentee ballot, please make sure you read the instructions before filling it out. And if you waited until the last minute to return your ballot, it happens, no judgment. Here's an insider tip to ensure your ballot is counted. Our mail does not get postmarked until it arrives in Anchorage. To ensure that your ballot is postmarked by Election Day, you can ask at the counter of your local post office to have your ballot postmarked by hand. Or if you want to skip the line at the post office, you can deliver your ballot to the drop box outside the State of Alaska building at 675 7th Avenue here in Fairbanks. It's across the street from Sadler's until 8 p.m. on Election Day. This is our final political forum for the 2020 election season. If you missed any of our previous events, recordings of all 2020 Fairbanks Chamber forums can be found at fairbankschamber.org. Just click the political forums banner at the top of the page. We will return next week to our usual Tuesday tradition of informative lunchtime presentations about the issues affecting business and community right here locally. Dr. Karen Gaborek will present her annual State of the Schools address next Tuesday at noon. It's really been my pleasure to moderate this forum today, and I wish you all the best as you wrap up your campaigns on Tuesday. Thank you for tuning in today, Fairbanks. Now let's get back to work. Happy voting, everyone.
Thanks so much, Sabrina. Wonderful job. Thank you.